You're good to go.
Oh, okay, we're good to go? Okay, great, thanks. So welcome to the session, Improving Repositories Through Collaboration. I'm Bob Downs, and my co-conveners are Kirsten Leonard, Lily Zhang, Devin Ray Donaldson, and Yao Roca da Silva. And next slide. We're having a joint meeting of the Repository Platforms for Research Data Interest Group and the Domain Repositories Interest Group. And there's a link to our session description. Next slide, please. And our interest group leadership consists of the RDA Repository Platforms for Research Data co-chairs. That's Lily Zhang, Devin Ray Donaldson, Yao Roca da Silva, and myself, Robert Downs. And our previous co-chairs were David Wilcox, Ralph Mueller-Peppercorn, Stefan Kramer, and Michael Jones. And our tab liaison is Helen Glaves. And the RDA Domain Repositories Interest Group co-chairs are Kirsten Leonard, who's here with us today, and Peter Dorn. And the Domain Repositories liaison is Francois Genova. Next slide, please. So for those who are new to the Repository Platforms for Research Interest Group, basically we're trying to improve the usability and technical capabilities of repository platforms so that we can collect usage experiences, define requirements, evaluate implementations, and identify limitations of current solutions. And we're trying to do this with various repository managers, providers, and developers. And hopefully we can offer recommendations, knowledge collections, or new working groups to investigate the identified issues. Next slide, please. The Domain Repositories Interest Group, as their charter, have all domain repositories have shared interests in data curation, dissemination, preservation, and institutional sustainability. And the interest group will provide a forum for sharing practical experiences and developing joint projects. Next slide, please. Oh, Gretchen Green, she mentioned that she is the new tab liaison for domain repository. So sorry about that, Gretchen. And welcome. We're glad to see you there. So for our agenda today, I'm first giving the intro here, Improving Repositories Through Collaboration. Next, Lily Zhang will talk about exploration of better information services in the Federated Research Cloud, lessons in the CST Cloud. Then Kirsten Leonard will be talking about sharing infrastructure among domain repositories, an approach of the Council of Data Facilities. After that, Karen Payne will discuss World Data System International Technology Office, syndication to integration. Then Marielle Gruet and Renee Schneider will talk about open research data repositories in Switzerland. In Store D, a suite of tools aimed at academic institutions to choose their strategy. And then we're going to have a discussion where we talk about collaboratively selecting and improving data repository platforms and tools to efficiently foster open science. Next slide, please. So collaboration offers opportunities for efficient improvement, and some common approaches might be adopting technology developed by another repository. So that's probably one of the simplest ways of going about this. Another way is developing technology in conjunction with another repository, where say 2 or more repositories get together and contribute aspects of the new technology, and then they're able to adopt that developed technology. Another way of collaborating is to just compare technology with another repository. And out of that comparison, each repository might identify opportunities for further improvement. Next slide, please. We can have collaboration, that's it. Collaboration among many repositories to scale efficiencies. And so similar to the example where repositories all contribute to a shared objective or a shared technology, many can do that. Another way might be where, say, one repository is sharing their technology with two other technologies, and perhaps that's what you would see at the top there. Or alternatively, perhaps as you see in the bottom, you have the repository working with another repository to develop technology, and then comparing their technology with yet another one. And out of these types of arrangements, then we could say that all boats will rise with the tide, so to speak. Next slide, please. So I want to suggest that collaboratively sharing experience with adoption of resources offers identification of candidate products or services. That is, we can see the availability of alternative resources for a particular function. We can identify criteria used to evaluate resources for a particular function, or inventory and compare adoptable resources, or share contacts for successful and unsuccessful implementations. When assessing a candidate product or service for adoption, we can ask how and why adoption of a candidate resource was successful, discover how to avoid pitfalls during adoption of a candidate resource, and find out why a candidate resource was not chosen for adoption, or why adoption of a candidate resource was not completed successfully. And then next slide, please. I just want to leave you with some questions for consideration. How might the identification of collaborators be facilitated? How might collaboration opportunities be justified to organizational leaders? And how can potential collaborators identify support for collaborating? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lily Zhang.
So, can you hear me? Can I start now? Okay. So this is Lily from the Computer Network Information Center of CASE, and my topic today is about the exploration of better information services in CST Cloud. Obviously speaking, this slide is a little bit fresh, and then this is one of the topics we are going to discuss within this year. So it's open for comments, and there is no finalized solution so far. And for this topic, I'd like to introduce 3 parts. The first is a brief introduction about the CST Cloud. And the second is about the challenges and the opportunities ahead. The third is possible solutions and implementation so far, and some possible discussions. So for the CST Cloud, the Chinese Science and Technology Cloud, it is taken as one of those national infrastructures for research, and it supports the open scientific research with integrated cloud services for different research scenarios. And we could see from this mission that it wants to define a kind of open architecture to dynamically convert different infrastructures and research resources, and also co-design a kind of integrated service model for different science discovery. And based on all of this, it might be exploration of a win-win mechanism between different stakeholders. And based on all these missions, as I mentioned also in plenary 16, within the 5 years exploration so far, we could see from the service capacity of that platform for computation, for data storage, for network connectivity, for data sharing and softwares. And for techie users, we have 3 parts: the individual researchers themselves, the service providers, as well as resources providers. And as I said, through the recent 5 years work, we see there are something we still keep the same. That might be that this platform is developed for science research, and it should be user-oriented. And
Lily, can we do a quick check? Like, your slides don't seem to be forwarding to anyone, so I don't know if you have them in presentation mode or already.
Yes, I'm already in presentation mode.
Okay, then can you maybe unshare again and check which one, which screen you're sharing? I think you might have like a 2-screen setup and we're seeing the wrong one. That's not moving forward, unfortunately. Sorry for interrupting, but
what can I do? I just shared my slide part, or the entire screen is better.
Maybe entire screen. Let's try that and hope that works then.
This part. Does that work?
Now we see Juno. I don't know. It's do you have a separate screen where you have the slides open? Sorry for live troubleshooting here. Okay. I've been
This time.
Presentation mode first, and then yes, that looks good. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for that.
No.
So,
no.
Okay. The thing I mentioned is we keep still the same, that we develop the platform for science and it should be the user oriented, and we hope it could be a one-stop information service portal for those researchers. As I mentioned, for the 3 different target users, we provide the different research resources and services to like 100,000 researchers within the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So based on all these things, we see the scenarios is gradually changing also. Like we could see that there are more and more engagement from different stakeholders, like those service providers, resources providers, as well as end users. And besides, we could also see that the cloud environment is becoming more and more popular, but we see it has a lot of advantages, like saving a lot of things, and but also have the vulnerables of its own. And besides, how could we have those design the different type of services and contribute to the whole service portfolio, and how we deliver different kind of information services to the end users might be a certain problem. And besides, we see that the service scenarios become more and more complex in real research life cycle. Probably some of these information services focus on a part of a certain scenarios within a certain stage of the research. But if we look a little bit higher from the life cycle part, we will see that there are some of these services that are still separated from one and each other. So if we translate them into different questions, there may list some of them. The first is we should answer what kind of cloud-enabled services we could provide based on this portal. And there are already some, but we could possibly explore something more. And besides, if we have the cloud solution to get different service providers and resources provided connected, how could we guarantee the cyber security for them to ensure the reliability and the sustainability for those providers to guarantee they would like to provide those services to their end users on your platform? And another thing is there are a bunch of things we could provide, but how could we define the granularity of those services and how we deliver those services is another question. And besides, for the people part, we could see that possible we should redesign kind of efficient reward incentive system to attract both those service and resources providers as well as those end users to let them use these things. And how could we keep those models sustained, because it sounds like a giant picture with everybody involved within the research. So the sustained model is another thing. And to integrate different research resources and within this distributed environment, and for end users, here might be some of things we are talking about. One of them is from the service level things. We could see that maybe there is an example. We could see different services like a service A, B, C, and they are separately. If there is any solutions we could employ to cut them into like a very basic, fundamental or meta service level things and recombine them together upon a particular strategy, we could have those previous services into a more orderly, organized, combined services to their specific end users. But there might be another circumstances. Those services are separated and very hard to just cut them into pieces to reorganize those things. Then we could have another strategy like the implementation of those container technology, like to put them into kind of different box, and this way we could just increase the efficiency and let them used by those end users more smoothly. And another thing is from the resources level, we see that those resources providers, they all have their own things. They may be taken up at a time or another, but sometimes there is a vacancy. So we are talking about if it's possible for us to collect something that is available so far and that could be publicized and get together. So we could turn to the Cloud Federation solution. And to more specific focus on these scenarios, one of the initiatives we do now is about the Open Science Cloud Initiative. In the next slide, we could see you. In this global open science cloud initiative, it is founded by the Chinese Academy of Sciences within the following 5 years. And the focus of that may including the sharing of different policies and frameworks for sustainability and some principles for policy. And also we have some technical infrastructure development for interoperability. This focus on like the network, the day part, the authentication authorization part, as well as others. And besides, we may have many demonstrations focusing on data and services. And this picture shows the components probably from the full path. The first is about the development from both the resources, services, and technology part to have like test bed across different disciplines, focusing on a certain problem, and also things like the management of this and the governance from the policy part, as well as the community outreach. And so towards this initiative, we have something, this slide shows the current progress from the network part. We are trying to get connected to the global scale. And from the security part, especially for the authentication and authorization part, we have the CSC cloud connected to also some of these strategic partners around the world, like the EDUGAN. And from the governance part, we have been engaged into the CODATA decadal program as one of these practices. And most of the important, as I have mentioned, those services should be tailored to different end users. So we should have specified different research scenarios, and those properly use cases may focus on different perspective. Like this one is for space physics, biology, and this one is for SDG. It's mainly focused on geoscience part, and this one is also for the biology part. So we are trying to start from different use case and let this use case try to explore different kind of specific scenarios and have our thoughts about the design, the reorganization of the services integrated, implemented on this kind of demonstration. And so I think above all, I'm not quite sure how the information services should look like in the future, but at least we could focus on that it should be the open science oriented. It means not only the basic infrastructures, the platforms, but also those research resources on them should be open and a kind of transparent. And besides, within each scenarios, we could see that those different research resources should get them flowed and interconnected between each other. It means that we have the data shared, but also those affiliated tools, algorithms, and the online process analysis procedures, as well as those knowledge outputs, all in the distributed research environment. And besides, I'm not quite sure if there will be much more, but I think so. It should be more and more flexible information resources that should be enabled by those cloud environment, but at least it should be towards the open science cloud part. And here in the last slide, I just showed some of the reference for the introduction of the platform and the GeoC initiative, as well as in engagement into the CODATA hard call for cooperation. And we have three recent discussion focusing on the open science cloud part also. Welcome for further participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily. Before we go on to the discussion, why don't we have the rest of the speakers and then we can discuss them all together. So our next speaker is Kirsten Leonard, and she's going to talk about sharing infrastructure among domain repositories and approach of the Council of Data Facilities. Welcome, Kirsten.
I think I need the slides from Patricia to show them because I was unable earlier to share my screen. There we go. Thank you. That should work. Yeah, unfortunately, that also makes the slides pretty small, but it's great to be able to present about this effort of the Council of Data Facilities to figure out a framework how to share infrastructure and thus address challenges that many of the domain repositories in the earth sciences face. This is an effort that has been led by the Executive Committee of the Council of Data Facilities, and the people involved have been Jerry Carter from the IRIS facility, Bob Downs from CEASON, Corinna Grease from the Environmental Data Initiative, Dan Katz from the University of Illinois, and the National, NCSA. Computing, I am blanking out at the moment, sorry. Steve Dix from San Diego and Mohan Ramamurthy from Unidata. Next slide, please. So the Council of Data Facilities in itself is a collaboration among different data facilities in the geosciences. It was created through the EarthCube program and aims to basically advance coordination, collaboration between earth, space, and environmental data facilities with the goal to advance science, but also promoting the value of domain-specific data curation and thus ensuring sustainability and support for the facilities. And then actually, as I mentioned, address common challenges for the facilities in order to respond to the needs of the community with respect to scalable and trustworthy and sustainable services. Next slide, please. So the members of the Council of Data Facilities are primarily data facilities for different domains in the earth sciences that are funded by the National Science Foundation, but there are also a substantial number of other federal, state, and local data facilities and large funded research and development centers, and we have some international and nonprofit facilities as well as associate members who just align with the goals of the CDF. Next slide, please. So the mission is laid out in a charter, and I wanted to specifically draw attention to the part that lays out the focus on supporting the development and use of shared infrastructure services. And that pertains to shared computing services, professional staff development and training and related activities, among many other goals here for the Council of Data Facilities. Next slide, please. So in 2018, the CDF actually established a working group to explore options for shared infrastructure and address the needs of the facilities, identify the needs and try to figure out solutions. So the goal was to basically create a framework for sustainable collaboration that would, on the one hand, advance the technology-based services, primarily computing capacity, storage capacity, to address the needs of researchers with increasing data volumes, exploration of data in the cloud, and so on, but also address the challenges of working together as facilities that all have their own goals, their own charters, their own communities they need to serve. So, as I said, the working group started in 2018. It has conducted several surveys to identify the needs of the members in the CDF. It has organized a workshop that aimed to converge on a version for this shared infrastructure and developed a roadmap and the pilot. The challenges, and I will get back to this, are actually the implementation and finding the funding to implement the shared infrastructure. Next slide, please. And so the concept that was developed through the workshop and the surveys was that there would be a collective infrastructure that allows the facilities to co-locate their data with computational resources in a cloud environment and offer different levels of service such as infrastructure as a service, all the way down to software as a service. It would allow the facilities to invest less of their effort into maintaining infrastructure and being able to focus on data curation following community and domain-specific best practices. But an important aspect is to actually advance a culture of coordination and operating with shared resources, which is likely to be the paradigm of the future. But it was clear that repositories wanted to retain autonomy that allows them to address the needs of their specific communities. Next slide, please. And I'm really sorry. In order to actually obtain funding for advancing this effort and getting buy-in from the members, we developed a value proposition that I think is very strong on the side of the scientific benefits, because this infrastructure will help research scientists to do better interdisciplinary and innovative science, as it will become easier to access data and services and use the increasing volumes of big data and high-performance computing approaches. It will also allow data facilities to become more efficient, resilient in operating a shared infrastructure, sustainable, and it will help to converge to more consistent best practices in the curation of data, in data documentation, in data versioning, and all these good things necessary to provide trustworthy services. For the funding agencies, we see the value in accelerating scientific discovery, in that, again, we're co-locating data and computing so that data facilities can become more sustainable and resilient. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, the challenges here are in the implementation and finding the funding to transition facilities from their current independent operation to a shared infrastructure and figuring out a sustainable business model for the future. Next slide, please. In order to actually advance the understanding of the needs, expectations, the current landscape of available HPC infrastructure and cloud resources, we proposed a research coordination network to take these planning efforts to the next level. This proposal was not funded. Next slide, please. So we started to work on a pilot project that would involve a certain group of facilities, only a limited number, to test the concept of a science platform. This project had the idea of prototyping the shared CDF infrastructure, its architecture, and figuring out the governance and resource management to satisfy what the CDF members have expressed as their need. We also considered this as a great opportunity to provide input into NSF's planning of future national research programs for HPC and for cloud resources. We're still exploring funding programs to propose this pilot project too. Next slide, please. We can skip this slide. I see that time is advancing. So one question that was asked in the process of creating this pilot project due to one of the participants who has been involved in NASA's Astrophysics Archives program was, does the CDF actually, is it ready to buy into anything analogous to what the review of the NASA Astrophysics Archives program proposed, which was to really fully integrate all repositories into a single unified science platform under unified funding, if that would be a better pathway towards true interoperability between the facilities and a shared infrastructure. And we discussed this option, and it becomes clear that we're not ready for this step yet. Next slide, please. So where do we stand now? We still have buy-in from all the members to move towards a shared infrastructure, but unfortunately for some facilities, the needs to extend their storage capacity, their computing capacity has become so urgent that they had to start creating independent solutions already, which will impact the planning activities that we've been doing. And we continue as a working group to explore funding opportunities, and we're increasingly moving towards an effort that focuses on scientific drivers of interdisciplinary science programs that are being developed within or actually existing within the National Science Foundation's geosciences programs, such as, response to volcano eruptions or critical zone science that is going on right now. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. That was great. Our next speaker will be Karen Payne, and she's going to be talking about World Data System International Technology Office, syndication through integration. Patricia, do you have the recording?
My name is Karen Payne. I'm the Associate Director for International Technology for the World Data System, speaking to you from the University of Victoria in Western Canada, where I would like to acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanic peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue until this day. I want to thank Bob for inviting me to speak. I apologize for not being there in person. I think it's about 3 a.m. in Western Canada, so I'm asleep while you're working. But I did want to take the opportunity to briefly highlight some of the work my office did last year and the direction that we're going in the year ahead. And I wanted to start by acknowledging that the outcome from the RDIG has really helped a lot, not only in terms of some of the work that we did last year, but will likely get incorporated into a new working group going forward that I'll talk about in a minute. So if you are here and you created and you contributed to this matrix of use cases for functional requirements, I really commend you for a great effort. And consistent with your RPIG recommendation for data access, last year, my office received funding from Canada's new Digital Research Infrastructure Organization, or NDRIO, to look at metadata syndication strategies. And specifically, we had two work packages. One was conducted largely under a World Data System working group, the first ITO working group for the World Data System, that was designed to help research data repository managers create an implementation plan for harvestable metadata services, so very traditional metadata publishing. So this was done with a group of 8 different repositories globally, and we are in the process right now. We've gathered our use cases, and we're in the process right now of writing a paper about what we learned about that. But perhaps more interesting and in support of data managers who may be looking for harvesters to consume their services and amplify their data holdings, we created a database describing metadata aggregators, along with an associated guide to metadata aggregators. We had 4 sources of lists of data repositories, and that was nearly 1,000 repositories that we reviewed. Each of them we reviewed manually to identify those data repositories who were considered open to harvesting metadata, and we described them and their technologies and their the domains that they serve. And so our intent is to make this, and then we also did some prepackaged reports, easily to access prepackaged reports, if you're not familiar with Microsoft Access. Our intent is to make this database freely available on the World Data Systems Zenodo instance under a CC BY license, if we get release from the funding agency to do so, and I think that'll be forthcoming soon. We had a second work package also looking at metadata publishing or syndication strategies, but this one was done in concert with the RDA Research Metadata Schemas Working Group to support data managers interested in adding schema.org or semantic markup to metadata. This is all being driven largely by data repositories who want to be included in Google dataset search. We created, so part of the Research Metadata Schemas Working Group, what they did was they collected existing cases where a schema.org markup has been applied to an existing research metadata standard. And then they found equivalent terms between how data managers have applied equivalent terms between the schema.org terms and the metadata properties. And so we took those crosswalks and we created a simple interactive tool, and I will try to show you that now. So this is the interactive visualization tool of schema.org crosswalks. And there's a different suite of tools here that allow you to visualize the crosswalks between schema.org and standard metadata services or metadata standards. So for example, you can just choose a standard and you can find the equivalent terms in the bioschemas, for example, terms and their equivalent terms in the schema.org properties. You could search for any term that you like and see where it shows up either on in any metadata standard or schema.org standard. This is one that I think is particularly interesting. You can choose any schema.org term, and then you can see how it maps to different terms in different metadata standards. And the idea behind this was that we wanted to sort of promote a consistent use of crosswalks between schema.org terms and metadata properties. So we were able to use this tool, for example, to provide recommendations to CSIN for the more metadata mappings between their proprietary metadata standard and schema.org terms. And then this is a small gap analysis. These are shows the size of the box, shows the number of terms in the metadata standard that did not have a schema.org property. So what we're saying here is that schema.org is very lightweight. It's not going to cover all of the terms in a robust metadata standard. The closest mapping, of course, being DCAT. So the RDA Research Metadata Schemas Working Group, in addition to the crosswalks, they're going to be publishing an SDO guidance document. And in addition to contributing to that guidance documents, we received a request to write a separate primer on schema.org for data managers, which we did. This is intended to be the document before the RDA document. It's very accessible, starts with very basic first principles, and it was reviewed by various members of different communities. We have submitted it to the Journal of Data and Information Science, hopefully for publication. Once that's been accepted for publication, we will create a very lightweight version to be included in the ESIP website, or Science Information Partners website. So look forward to that. So this past year has been about data publishing and looking forward, or metadata publishing, and looking forward, we're interested in making sure integration of data services and making sure that there's ease of access of data with compute and analysis services, so from publishing to integration. We're doing that in a couple of ways, and again, I commend the DPIG for the work that you've done. Some of you may be familiar with the Global Open Research Commons, or the GORC interest group, and the GORC benchmarking working groups. We are, in these groups, we are examining the national, pan-national, and domain-specific research commons, or clouds, like the European Open Science Cloud, the African Open Science Platform, the International Virtual Observatory Alliance, what we consider commons. And we are together trying to create a roadmap to make sure that these commons are integrated and interoperable. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is by trying to collect a series of what we refer to as benchmarks or features. So again, we're going to rely on the DPIG output characterizing data repositories and their features, but we're going to augment that with other types of features that support software and compute resources. And we're referring to all of these as benchmarks. So examples of benchmarks might be if a commons has a consistent and openly available data privacy policy, that's a benchmark. If a commons has a federated authentication and authorization infrastructure, if they have a workflow for adding and managing PIDs for managed assets, all of these are sort of benchmarks in the maturity of a commons. Some of these may have been discussed before. This group is very much working from the National National Data Services Working Group, if any of you are involved in that. And as part of this work, we are certainly looking at how the commons are showing or exposing these features or benchmarks, either in service catalogs or in other ways. And so we will, in addition to that, we will continue to work on semantics more broadly. We are focusing on polar ocean earth sciences semantic coordination, especially the coordination between Antarctic and Arctic vocabulary alignment. There's a huge range of partners inside of this that we're working with, both inside the World Data System and outside the World Data System. And in addition to that, we are introducing a new work package on data integration with virtual research environments and notebooks. And there are two RDA groups that are working on that will be working with us as well. And the point of this package is that I want to start capturing how researchers discover and access data within their analytics packages. I don't want them necessarily to go have to search for data. I want to start documenting how data is made available to them. If they have to go conduct a separate search and bring their own data to a process, or if they're restricted to data curated for a specific platform. The goal is that we want to try to open up VREs and notebooks to access more data holdings. And as part of this, this is the first time I'm announcing this publicly, but we will be awarding a WDS data prize, a cash prize, demonstrating for the winner of a competition that we're going to be launching for data scientists or researchers or developers who demonstrate a workflow between a WDS member data and some platform to create an output, an analysis, or a visualization. So we're very excited about that. So I want to thank and acknowledge the research associates at the ITO, Alicia and Chantel, who worked on these publishing packages and will continue forward into the new integration work packages. Don't hesitate to reach out either to me or to them directly if you have any questions. And thanks again for inviting me to speak. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Karen. And our next speakers are Marielle Gruet and Renee Schneider, talking about open research data repositories in Switzerland in STORE-D, a suite of tools aimed at academic institutions to choose their strategy.
Thank you, Robert. I think that Patricia can start the recording of her presentation now. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks to the organizers of the session for this opportunity to present our work today. I will be focusing on open research data in Switzerland and on InstoRed, a tool that we developed to help the academic institutions choose their strategy in terms of open data repositories. The other co-author of this work is René Schneider, and we both won the Information Science Department of Haute École de Gestion at Geneva in Switzerland. A few words of context first. Open science, in a general way of speaking, aims at contributing to the research integrity and efficiency and at facilitating new research. Two kinds of entities contribute to open science and in particular to open research data. The main funders of academic research require to open data for the sake of research tracking, transparency, and return on investment. In Switzerland, those main funders are Swiss National Science Foundation and H2020, the European Framework Programme. The scientific editors also often require that the data supporting the results they publish are made open for the sake of transparency. The research institutions, by complying with those requirements, also put in practice their frequent commitment to open science. In practice, the research data are made open into an appropriate data repository where they are stored, made publicly accessible, and kept reusable. The research institutions actually support the data producers, thus the researchers, in opening their data by providing them information, guidelines, and possibly training and coaching for the preparation of the data and the deposit process. And also they issue recommendations for the selection of the most appropriate repository. The main question on which we focus here is which recommendations should be issued and how should they be set up based on which criteria. Besides the external requirements, several aspects must be considered when thinking of setting up these recommendations. First, there is currently a wide offer of repositories, very diverse, and that makes it hard to select a specific one. Second, each research discipline or community has specific needs for when it comes to open its data. And these needs translate into requirements for functionalities and tools to be provided by the repository. Third, each institution must cope with specific internal constraints, such as the limited resources, human and financial ones, available to support sharing of data. Consequently, with those three aspects, there is no one-size-fits-all solution in terms of data repository, and we have to understand and identify where these elements intersect and how we can translate this into a more formal strategy. We also need to keep in mind that besides pointing to an existing data repository, there are two other possible options for the institution. Adapt data, an existing institutional repository for publications, or develop a completely new institutional data one. Again, how must this choice be made based on which criteria and how should be specified this repository? Putting then all these elements together, the external requirements, the disciplinary needs and the institutional parameters, and the three-option path, we propose the following roadmap for the institution to select the best strategy. Starting with external requirements on data, we can already identify elements needed for the repository to be compliant, such as CTS certification, for instance, recommended by H2020, or the compliance with the FAIR principles on data. By taking into account the institutional context, we can further specify the ideal repository. This latter can then be compared to what is available. If an existing repository matches enough the wish list, it can then be recommended to the researchers. Otherwise, the institution may plan to adapt to data its publication repository or to develop its own new one. Whatever the option path, the strategy, the final objective is always the same, that the institution points to or provides the researchers with the most appropriate repository for the specific case of the institution and of its research data produced by its researchers. Along this process, with our tool InstoRed, Institutional Strategy Tool for Open Research Data. We provide relevant guidelines so that the institution identifies the specificities of the ideal repository, select the right option path, and the right repository to be recommended, or provide the right one in a well-informed and robust way. We actually provide 3 tools in 3 steps with InstoRed. In a first step, the institution collects information with a document called Vademecum, where the information is organized by category. For instance, the external requirements on the data, the practices in use with the data in the institution. It also helps to set up the wish list about the data repository by suggesting a list of aspects to be investigated. In a second step, the institution fixes its strategy with a decision-making guide showing the flow chart, and which makes use of the information collected at the previous step, and which is marked here with the colored dots. In the last step, guidelines and more resources are provided with a companion document to help put into practice the strategy fixed at the second step. A few highlights about this decision-making guide. The main process, choosing a strategy or an option path, is triggered if a gap is observed between the requirements and the current practices in the institution. The institution is then taken with the 3 options in this specific order: use, adapt, or create. In the case of use, first the possibility of using a disciplinary repository is investigated, then the possibility of using the institution one if it exists, then of using a generalist one. Most steps in the flowchart are fed by either decisional parameters or other kind of information, like the specificities of the repository to be created, for instance, and all this information comes from the Vademecum. The exit points of the process are no change in the strategy, recommendations to use an existing repository, or a new repository made available and recommended, of course, either adapted or a completely new one. You can have a closer look at the flowchart by clicking here, and this also takes us to a prototype of an internet version that we've developed for internet, and which I'm going to show you briefly now. So it's gonna take me a few seconds to move to the right window. So first of all, with this internet version, the 3 steps or tasks, as we name them here, use, adapt, or create, are presented at the same level so that they can be accessed in any order and independently from each other. They also presented at the same level as the task of assessing the compliance between practices and requirements. With this first task, the user may refer to the external requirements on data in Switzerland. They're listed here, the ones from SNSF and from H2020. The user may also provide the requirements from the country of the institution if this one is not from Switzerland. With the task, with second task, which is about finding the appropriate existing repository, the middle table here provides a list of items to be examined about the research data in the institution, about the resources available for using the repository. you may recognize the categories of the vademecum. And also in the bottom part, there's a list of aspects to be investigated to specify the data repository to be used. And this wish list may be compared to the right part of the page, where a selection of data repositories is given with the details, so that institution is in the position to pick up the most suitable existing repository to address its wish list. With the creation step, again, some guidelines are provided to collect useful information about available resources to create a new repository, about technical option, which would be the one fitting the institution needs and resources. And this can be compared to the right part of the page with a selection of technical solutions in order to pick up the most fitted one. And the creation step itself gives a list of items to be looked at for the institution to specify the new data repository and to set up the project for the creation and the development of the repository. For tasks 2, 3, and 4, other resources are provided in this page, mainly the ones from the companion document, to help put into practice a strategy. And the user is invited to provide his or her feedback and to share the institution experience with the tool. I'm now coming back to the slide. And that is actually the last slide of my presentation. At the conclusion, I'd like to say that with InstoRed, we provide a self-service tool that any institution can easily handle and use at its own pace. It's a flexible process. The steps or tasks can be used independently from each other in any order and for ad hoc needs, which might be checking the compliance between practices and requirements, evaluating if a more fitted repository than the one recommended by the institution exists, or improving the institutional repository. This tool is easy to adapt to other requirements in the countries, or to an evolution of the context, or to changes in the institutional practices. The internet version includes a collaborative aspect with the possibility of sharing the institution experience. And our future plans after the end of the development of the internet version would be to finalize this development, to consolidate this version by making it tested by institutions from Switzerland or from other countries, and to consolidate the prototype. You may find more results and more details in my master thesis and in a recent article from the end of last year. They're both in French, I have to warn you. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Renee. Please post any questions you might have in the Q&A, and that way we can begin to discuss those. I don't see, okay, oh yeah, here's a question from Gillis. Is the STORAD website publicly accessible? Marielle?
It is not. It is not publicly accessible at the moment. The only thing that you can do for now is explore it with the link that I've posted in the chat. It's a prototype, so we're keeping it that way until it's fully developed and until we can make it until we can make it more publicly accessible. But we would be your feedback would be very welcome on the prototype version.
And we also have another question for you, Marielle. Is the STORAD procedure part of the data management plans?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Is the storage procedure part of the data management plans?
No, we don't. I'm not sure I'm fully getting the question, but we don't focus on DMP plans or storage. René, do you have something to add?
Yeah, maybe it's just, I think it might be helpful as a reflection. So before even starting the DMP, you know, and when you do the DMP, you ask yourselves question about where to put the data. Then this process that Muriel described could be part of that. But it's usually the DMP has to be done by the researcher, and this is maybe on another level. So it's more, there are other stakeholders that will do this reflective work. Oh, I see 2 of these things.
Great. And while you are on the floor, both of you, Marielle and René, considering the diversity of repositories, how might the selection of a disciplinary repository be assisted as new repositories become available?
I didn't get the last part of that question. Could you repeat it once, please?
Yes, considering the diversity of repositories, how might the selection of a disciplinary repository be assisted as new repositories become available?
Yeah. I think the process will be the same. Marielle, even maybe you could confirm that the process is, so if it is disciplinary or not, it might be in the end, in the detail, different, but on the basic questions about how to use existing one, adapt or create, that will be the same process. Do you agree, Marielle?
Yes, I think the basic process could be the same, yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, maybe just to give some feedback, because in the title Switzerland is mentioned. What we noticed is that there is a trend to create and create and create. So every university, there are something like, let's say 10 or something like that in Switzerland, which is a small country, is trying to create the own repository. And our idea was, is that really helpful? Independent of the fact that it is disciplinary, because there are also disciplinary repositories to be created. And our idea is that really useful to restart and rebuild from scratch at every place, even if there's only little differences in the needs. So that was the basic reflection behind, of doing this reflective work.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's certainly worth considering. There might be some redundancy at some point if the
yes. I think I would even call it something like a mushroom effect. No, so you have every institution looking at the other one. Oh, they're building their own repository, so let's do the same. No, despite the fact that there are already quite a large number of repositories existing. No.
Yes, that duplication at a certain point might not be as valuable as having more diverse repositories, so that the disciplines that aren't covered do get covered.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for Lily. How might sharing of policies and services be envisioned for the global Open Science Cloud?
You mean the policy engagement into the GEOS plan, right?
Yes.
Yes, I think maybe I didn't say a lot about GEOS initiative, but for our side, the Chinese Academy of Sciences found us that program meant for international cooperation. So we are getting collaborated by test bed, by technology demonstration. But among all the things, the policy part, the governance of cross-border test bed will be one of the most important issues. We should identify the interoperability not only from the technical perspective, but also from the policy part to ensure that everyone who has been engaged into this GEOS platform should have kind of equal rights and get them all into trusted ecosystem. So for the policy part, so far we have established a working group from the co-data perspective. And for the next step, it will break out into quite a smaller working groups focusing like the semantics, the technical part, the governance. So quite a smaller but detailed working groups to talk about a certain kind of governance and the policy issues within the GEOS part. But I think if we call it the global open science cloud or cloud federation, we need more cooperation. So not only the program, but also this discussion about GEOS, the policy research will be open for everyone who would like or are interested in that. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Lily. Excuse me. I have one of the questions for consideration that I posed earlier. How might the identification of collaborators be facilitated? And I'd like to open that up for anyone to answer, either any of the presenters or even any of the attendees. I'll repeat it again. How might the identification of collaborators be facilitated? That is, if a repository needs resources, how might we help them to identify collaborators? Anyone? Well, one thought is this could be done through I'm sorry, Kirsten, did you have a response?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking of the Council of Data Facilities and, you know, how it has in some way facilitated communication among, data facilities. And, you know, one aspect is clearly that we have little ways to, or it's not well developed yet to have international participation. And I wonder if something similar to what we have with the CDF here, largely based in the US, if something like a council or a group of data repositories can be generated, can be created on a more global scale, on an international level. And that could actually facilitate those type of interactions, saying we are in need for, better long-term storage and not only across different types of repositories, because I see as myself running a domain repository, the need to work closer with institutional repositories or, you know, long-term storage facilities. It could also help to coordinate between facilities that have similar focus worldwide, and that might all be struggling and have, you know, some capability of leveraging. So I think that, you know, a better platform for interaction on an international scale is needed.
Yes, I agree.
WDS may be it, if that's a, you know, an option to explore.
Yeah, that's a thought as well. Yes, very good idea. And also the idea of collaborating with the institutional repositories is collaborating between the domain repositories and the institutional repositories could provide additional resources that both could leverage to better serve the audience. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next question? Okay, well, how might collaboration opportunities be justified to organizational leaders? So when we see that there might be an opportunity to collaborate with a potential partner, and it might be necessary to speak with the organizational leaders to get their acceptance of the plan. And I'm wondering if anyone has thoughts on how such a plan for collaboration with an external partner might be justified to the organizational leaders. And if anyone's had experience doing that, that also might be valuable to hear about. Any of the speakers have any thoughts on that? Well, I could share a little bit of experience here, and that one way to justify that is to show the cost savings that can be attained as a result of leveraging resources from a partner. I also see, Lily, did you have a comment on that as well?
Yes, for the collaboration part, I think during our talk within this hour, I'm still contacting another scientist from space physics to talk about our cooperation. I would like to share their story. They focus on data capture of reader data, and they have their, I think, other scientists in Europe who also capture there are certain kind of reader data with their own. And the two institutions probably have the demand to share data with each other. But kind of they need a general platform to support those kind of large-scale data transfer and sharing data models and a lot of other things. So after discussion together, we CNIC and another institute from the Europe, as well as those two individual institutions, would like to go together to work together on the cooperation. And I think based on this cooperation, the top thing is we could find a kind of mutual interest. Both the scientists, they operate with each other with a quite a specific scenarios about large-scale data transfer of the same kind of data, similar methodology, and quite similar scenarios for their particular research. And their data could be shared based on a kind of general data policy. So that's the premise. And besides, our institution could facilitate those processes. So we join together. So on the whole, I think if different repositories could get collaborated and when they adjust to their own things, it should at least build up a kind of based on the mutual interest and the mutual trust, and then they could start everything later about the detailed thing.
Oh, thank you very much, Lily. Those are excellent points. I see a question has popped up from Philip for Renee. And I'll read the question for those who can't see it. You say every university wants to establish their institutional repository. What kind of repository would you recommend to a researcher from a university not having their own institutional repository, and if there is no appropriate repository? Instead of an uncurated generic service like Zenodo. This is at least the recommendation from the EU Open Air. Renee, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, it's a long question.
Written down.
So it says, you say every university wants to establish their institutional repository. What kind of repository would you recommend to a researcher from a university not having their own institutional repository? And if there is no appropriate domain-specific repository?
Yes, and there was Zenodo was mentioned. No, so this depends very much on the policy of the institution. No, so if the institution allows you to put the data somewhere like Zenodo, and if there are no legal questions, this is something that could be done without any problem. But often there is not a policy, and usually in the policy, as soon as the institution says, okay, we will make this available, we will make a repository available, this is usually comes with the policy. So in this case, I think you have the read data, so the a place where you can search for the repositories, and as long as the institution does not give any clear indication, you are more or less free to put it where you want.
And Tanya followed up with a question, if an institute has a curated repository that is well established, then that is great. The reality in many places is that institute put something together where people can dump their data like Zenodo, and then there is no point. Did you want to comment on that at all? Or?
If an institute has a curated repository that is well established, then that is great. The reality in many places that institute puts something together where people can dump the data. Yes, this is the thing. Yeah, this is the thing. So I think in that case, the other thing is that the institutions should work together, now to either adapt an existing repository for several institutions, because often the step from open access repository to a data repository is not that far, so it's not that long to be done, and what is essential then is that there's a joint and concerted activity. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, great, thanks, Renee. And there's a question from Paul on the screen too.
For me, and yeah, I just see now the comment that is from Kirsten. This is sure. So there are several levels. Especially the curational level is not really treated very often, as whenever they say we have a repository, put there. No. Yeah, this is what Kirsten said. Oh, Marielle is joining me.
Yes, go ahead, Marielle.
Yeah, can you hear me? But institutional repository, the positive point is that they're gonna be a central place for the storage of institutional data. So they will make the data from the institution more visible. And also they will be specialized in the. There will be the. Sorry about my English. The staff from the university is there and should be able to understand the needs of the researchers in the institutions. And if there are resources devoted to that, they should be able to implement and to adapt, make the institutional repository fit for the data and adapted and specialized for the data produced in the institution. So it's not like a domain discipline repository, but it's more adapted to the data from the institution and the general repository.
Okay, thank you, Marielle. And I see a comment from Philip saying, yes, I agree with Renee that institutions should collaborate to establish repositories by adapting existing tools. I think that's on the screen now. And Andres has asked, there are a vast amount of data not available anywhere, which will never get reposited to perfect repositories, exactly because it demands so much manpower. A local repository with a bit more lax requirements. I couldn't see the rest of that one. And more local support could make much more data shared. Yes, I think those are excellent points. Did you want to comment on that, Renee or Marielle?
No, I completely agree with that. I think the local resources are very important. Being connected to the researchers, to what they produce, to how they produce, and to their needs, which should be something that staff from the university library, from the research department is able to do, is very, very important. It's crucial. Yeah.
And if I can add, usually from my point of view and my experience inside the library, there is especially the open access people a good starting point. And often they are really willing to help. And as we are experienced, also ready to extend already existing repositories and open them for data, which is usually a very good initiative if they can provide curational care.
So Kirsten has asked, I think that there is still a substantial unrealized benefit for domain repositories and institutional repositories to work together to follow domain-specific guidelines or leverage domain-specific data reviewed by domain repositories and the long-term curation at institutions. And I think those are great points, Kirsten.
Yes, thank you.
I just see a comment in the Q&A appeared, or in the chat, I guess, from Rob H. He said, generic repositories have no disciplinary functionality. A language researcher may want to listen to a sample rather than downloading a data set. And that a genetic researcher may want to see genetic variants, not download terabytes immediately. And yeah, those are excellent points, Rob, in terms of those specific disciplines. As I see, we're already past our time. I was wondering, did any one of the speakers have any parting words before we close the session? If not, I would like to thank all of our speakers, Lily, Kirsten, Karen, Marielle, and Renee, for sharing your thoughts with us and for contributing to the discussion. I'd also want to thank all the participants, especially those who contributed to the discussion with their questions and answers. And with that, I want to thank everybody, including the organizers of the Juno, Patricia, especially for helping us out with this. This is great. Anyway, have a very good day, everyone. Thank you again. Bye-bye.